Look, so my name's Tony Bezic. My business is Imagine Architecture. We are a two-person practice with an office in Tauranga in the Bay of Plenty and an office in New Plymouth. The New Plymouth office is manned by my long-suffering first ever employee back in 2004. And through many iterations of the business, he's still here, Stephen Dixon. So it's just the two of us. So that's our sweet spot for our business. It makes us pretty nimble, which means we can change and adapt the business easily. Larger practices, harder to do. And so, yeah, so that's who and where we are. We do primarily residential design, but we also do commercial work. I have a commercial background. Pre having my own practice, I worked in a strictly commercial environment. So I did a lot of large commercial work, shopping mall fit out, all that sort of stuff. So have a really good understanding around people and process, which sometimes doesn't always come through in residential practices. So some of those disciplines are sort of entrenched from that commercial background. But I started my own business in 2002 because I just wanted to design a house. You know, I've been working, I wanted to design houses for people. I designed and built my own house in 1997. Beauty of being young and naive, you just bought a piece of land, drew some plans and just got it built. With probably not really a lot of knowledge around what we now know, you know, when we're talking super home. So since 2002, the journey has just been evolving from, you know, one client and a computer, and that was the start of the business. Fast forward, probably, I don't know if I know, go back further. So if it's talking about healthy homes and the performance of homes, I was exposed to passive solar design at an early stage through one of my mentors. And so that was very much the 70s notion of north-facing glazing, capturing the sun at low angles, heating the house up, close the curtains, keep the warmth in, plant deciduous trees to shade it in the summer, let it be sunny in the winter and that sort of stuff. And I thought that sounds amazing. I read up and researched lots of architects around the world who did that in their different environments and stuff like that. I thought that's really cool that you can design buildings that do more than just provide shelter, that they can actually provide warmth and manage energy. I've subsequently over the years realized that's very hard to do very well in a sort of passive way, and the fact that, you know, once you plonk it on the site, everything else takes care of itself. There definitely needs to be more interventions to get a house working well. I bumped into Bob through ADNZ. So I've been a member since 2007. I was on the board from 2011 to 2017, which meant, and I was board chair for 3 of those years. So that also meant that I was front and centre of the organisation quite a bit. And so people like Bob, who were championing their cause on that, were on my radar quite a bit. Bob and I were at a seminar up in Auckland, I don't know, 2015, 2016, something like that. And we just got chatting about UPVC windows. And he just whips out his phone and says, check out this detail that we've done. And so that's probably the genesis of mine and Bob's relationship as far as understanding high performance, healthy homes. And then probably the next big thing that happened is in 2018. I was working in Europe. I have a renovation project under construction in Tuscany, which is interesting. It's a whole story in its own. But the client lived in Switzerland in a Passive House certified house outside of Zurich. And as you can imagine, in my profession, a lovely home built to these amazing standards. And I was walking around looking at all the bits of the house and going down into the basement and looking at the ventilation, heat recovery ventilation, you know, and just, you know, absorbing what was going on in this building. So it was quite fascinating. So we were there when the outdoor temperature was 35. In the winter, they get down into the -20. So they have a very wide temperature range that their buildings have to manage. And so I knew about Passive House, and I knew I had some familiarity. So we definitely had started in parallel to that, designing homes that were airtight or tested to airtightness, that had better performing windows, more insulation, and generally better than what the minimum standard was. And that definitely became our ethos. And also working on the, so that's obviously when clients are asking or keen for that stuff, but at the same time, um, as an architectural designer, you get to make lots of decisions for your clients that they never ask you to make. That's just your job to do. So a good example is, most clients don't tell you what kind of concrete slab they want. They just want a house with a floor. And so it's left up to me to specify the kind of concrete slab. So it's not a very big step for us just to specify a better concrete slab with a bit more insulation, because often I've had pushback from builders and say, well, how the heck do you get your clients to agree to it? I says, I don't ask, I just do it because it's the right thing to do. It's good practice. And so, people are paying me for my expertise. They know that we do, we market ourselves as doing better than the minimum and all that sort of stuff. So there's an expectation. Now, I guess that just means clients get more than they expect, which is good and in a positive way. Always mindful of budget and all those sort of things as well. But in recent years, what I've come to realize is there are lots of things that we can do well, but proving it and understanding it and guaranteeing it's another thing. So I've started to look at how can I validate what I'm doing when I'm communicating and engaging with the client, um, and so that's why I've personally gone down the Passive House route, is because the thermal modeling tools, the ability to tell you exactly what the energy demand for a building is going to be in actual use and those sort of things. So that's allowed me to provide concrete data, and also for myself, being able to make sure that I'm delivering when I'm making those decisions for the client. I'm not just, I'm very good at winging it and seat of the pants sort of stuff. But it's always better if you can actually say, this piece of paper, this software says that you can only need a 2.35 kilowatt heat pump. Don't let the man at Harvey Norman tell you that you need a 7 kilowatt, that sort of thing, because they're not using the tools that we're using to make those decisions. So we have a real passion just for healthy homes. We come from a client-centric approach, and so the client's first in everything. So we don't design houses for ourselves, we design them for our clients, which sounds great, but our industry is rife with people who just use clients to live out their architectural dreams. To me, I want to see people realize their dreams, which in turn makes me very happy. And then overlaid over that is we can create really awesome, healthy outcomes by making good decisions in design. And that's probably the area of education that's really society in general does not grasp or does not want to grasp. Like, even when you present it with them, they don't necessarily want to hear it. I just want the basic. I just want the code minimum. That's fine for me. I'm not worried about, yeah, I know about respiratory and asthma and mold and that, but we've got, it's, whatever. So there's a bit of a thing there that we're on a bit of a crusade there. Our tagline is changing lives through great architecture and design. And that change is all about those, changing a person's life. Is some of it is overt and in your face, like, it's a beautiful home, you feel great because it's a wonderful space to be in. But the others, a little bit more subtle in that, you're breathing fresh filtered air 24/7, no matter what the temperature or the outdoor environment is, that you're living in a constant temperature band rather than big peaks and troughs and stuff, and your health outcomes will be better and you didn't even realize it. So we're really passionate about that. And so that's become sort of a bit of a baseline for us. And when we design a home, so we find now that we've held the line a bit more on that, we're attracting those kind of clients, those that are asking for it. So those passive house projects that I mentioned, they're people asking us for that. We would like passive house if you can do it. And in the past, I've had to outsource that. Now, and I looked at the cost of outsourcing. I mean, that's like 5 times the price of doing the course. So put myself through the training. First time having to do long algebra. Look at that awful stuff. Having to do that manually in like 30 years, but that's all right. So just really passionate about health outcomes. So it's really about focusing on the client. I don't have an environmental crusade that I'm on. I'm an environmentalist in the fact that I enjoy nature, I enjoy clean air and stuff like that, but very much from a non-political, non-crusade point of view, if that makes sense. I just think everybody should be a good steward of the planet and do their little bit. And my little bit is designing healthy homes for people and changing their lives even if they didn't ask for it, changing it for the better. So that's kind of, I think, a good point for me to stop and give you a bit of an idea of what makes me tick. So the renovation side of it, one of the things that I'm originally from New Plymouth, hence having an office in New Plymouth still. And 3 years ago, I moved up here, and with a smaller practice, because we had a practice that was 8 at one point, big office, lots of mouths to feed, all that sort of stuff. Stephen and I sort of took a long, hard look about, we're in this business of changing people's lives and bringing joy to our clients. So when we were looking at our strategic plan for the business, we were looking at what brings us joy. And we established quite early on that renovations don't, and I'll come back to that. We like the whole new build path and we like the commercial. We also didn't like projects that involved lots and lots and lots of people. So we used to do some government work and so many layers of project management. It was very soul destroying. So we made a conscious decision not to get involved in renovations when I moved up here and sort of rebrand the business a bit. But through the Passive House study that I've been doing, they have a program called Enefit, which is the Passive House retrofit program for existing buildings. And through that study, like I thought, line in the sand, I just don't do renovations anymore. But through that study, I was like, I wouldn't actually mind having a crack at one of these again, now that I've got this new knowledge and a different perspective on it. And so one of the things they talked about, and it's exactly what you were saying, we have a lot of this old existing housing stock that's substandard. So in Europe, they have a bit of a culture of refurbishment and improving buildings, and a lot of it's legislated in the different countries, like in Germany and other places like that. They have to upgrade buildings to a certain standard, and they have upgrade codes. Okay, so when you upgrade a building, this is your minimum. So it's probably more developed than what we're dealing with. We've just got a building code, new or existing, we've got the rules around it. They are definitely looking at trying to make better houses, healthier houses through that refurbishment. But one of the things they talked about around renovating or refurbishment was you have 2 choices when you're confronted with an existing building, or 3. Leave it as it is and do nothing, so therefore not a good outcome. 2, refurbish it, or 3, knock it down. And so if we ignore the first one and assume we're doing something with this parcel of land that has a building on it, we have those 2 choices. And depending on the location, knocking it down, we may be able to build more buildings to a higher standard and perhaps provide housing for more people. So that's definitely, you see that in the inner city spaces, and where we're getting a bit of intensification as the population grows and as we try to use less land out on the fringe and that. So that's cool, that's new build and that. But with the renovation, it was quite interesting just understanding retrofit, and my motives for not liking it were I just hate peeling back the wall and finding stuff that I didn't know was there and nobody could possibly know. And how do you estimate a fee on something that you can't see, and all that sort of stuff. Those are my reasons. But when you put the super home or the passive house or the healthy home lens on it, and I'm going to take this house and I'm going to improve the health outcomes and the energy efficiency outcomes, all of a sudden I quite like that challenge. So this has only been in the last couple of weeks that I've been doing the study, and so I've had a bit of a paradigm shift around renovation projects. So my new rule is now I don't do renovations unless they're to a healthy home standard. So there you go. So so with that in mind, I think there is an opportunity. Obviously, we need to look at ways of improving the existing housing stock, and obviously there's a few small things around the rental property regulations around upgrading and minimum standards. Those, although pretty much everything that's legislated, and I'm sure Bob's told you, is never enough. Any advancement towards better is good, even if it's not where we would like it. So the fact that we can build a house to the building code and not have to put any heating in it, but a rental property must have heating. So it's crazy. So those things are great. So that's a given. So that's one area, obviously, that we can look at. So in the Enefit studies, the passive house studies, they start to address what do you do first and why, and how do you do it either as a single project or as a staged project, and the pros and cons of it. So one of the interesting ones is if we work on the assumption that the old house is damp, there's mold issues, what can we do to it in the first instance to improve it? One is obviously add a decent, efficient heating source, and two is putting in a ventilation system. And so that way you are bringing in fresh air into the building and you're moving moisture out. So that was one of the things they talked about. So that sort of, I hadn't really looked at renovation from a ventilation point of view. I just looked at it, not necessarily, we're always going to put insulation in the walls and improve the insulation in the roof, and no matter what windows we put in, they'll probably be better than what's there and that sort of stuff. But now you start to look at it as an opportunity to improve the house and make it better. So, and for me, with Passive House, I've now got the thermal modeling tools and a number of other tools that allow me to approach that. Back to your first question around cost and understanding how we might approach that with the public. So Kevin McLeod, Grand Designs, many years ago talked about we would get better design outcomes if people just made their buildings 10% smaller and spent the money that they would have otherwise spent on making them 10% better. So 200 square meter house, whatever the budget is, make it 180 square meters, take that money and make the improvement. So to me, that's a bit of an education and a conversation thing. I think given the exorbitant building costs we have now, the conversation about making it small is a bit easier to have, because things are just getting really, really expensive. And it's interesting, our fabric of our country is changing with immigration and all that sort of stuff. So we're quite a melting pot, more than ever. I had a meeting with some prospective clients, Chilean family, and multi-generational. So 3 generations would be living in the property. And Liliana, the grandmother, she told me she'd gone from this very grand house to an apartment in Punta Arenas, which is the southernmost city in Chile, very cold in Patagonia. And she didn't think that they would be able to go from their grand house into the small apartment. But then her story, because I thought this was her thing about telling me it has to be big, but she said it was well designed, everything was well considered. At no point did they feel like it wasn't big enough. And it was like 80 square meters for 2 people. So it was quite neat hearing from someone else's experience that small can be good.
Yeah.
And So that's a conversation that I often have with people. And in New Zealand, because of our nice big low density or low population density, wide open spaces, we just think, I come from Taranaki. A lot of my clients are retired dairy farmers. They've come from 200 hectares. They want a big house in town. I'm like, it's just you and Mrs. Farmer. You need about 100 square meters, and we'll give you a big shed, mate. We'll give you a big shed. But they want 400 square meters, and somebody's got to clean it, somebody's got to heat it. It's crazy. So I think that's a real area of education, just a area of conversation, and understanding what people's needs. One of the conversations I've always had with clients is this house for you or for the next person? And sometimes you get a funny look. And I said, what I mean by that is, are you planning to flip this in 3 years and play the property game? So that's cool. I says, that's a different set of rules to if you plan that to be here for 7 to 10 years. Because if you're going to be here 7 to 10 years, I'd be encouraging you to invest in yourselves, not necessarily for the next person. And so that conversation can sometimes allow us to make better choices. The reality is, when you're trying to improve the building stock, full stop, even if it's a short-term decision, we should still be trying to do better. But we sometimes can get away with doing more when the picture is a bit more long-term. And you can sort of dive into what their actual needs are, rather than what the next person might like and would be prepared to pay a premium for. The other thing is, when I'm talking to clients who talk about resale, I said, well, your mum, dad, and 2 kids, you are the resale market. You are the next client. So let's design this for you, because there will be plenty of people just like you who will want a house just like yours. So let's make it really, really good. So I think a lot of it is just around conversations, and obviously those conversations can be supported by good education. So things like what Superhome, proposing here, is beneficial in that it's a tool for me that I can point people to. It's a tool where people, when they're searching online, because we all do it now, we look online before we talk to anyone. So, think about how our habits have changed in the last 20 years. Nobody would ever trust information from a website 20 years ago. They would want a personal referral and talk to 5 people who know what they're talking about before they even jump on a computer. And now we don't even ask anybody for validation. We literally go online and make a decision before we talk to another human, which is useful because we can work with that and provide that information online for them. So, yeah, and I also think there's an openness though. So although there are lots of barriers, there's always barriers, and we can focus on the barriers, but I think society in general is becoming more aware of what's out there. So what I mean by that is, Grand Designs, I don't even watch it because it's like an occupational hazard. You just don't watch what you do. You do something else. If you go home, you don't do architecture and buildings, right? You do something else. Hop on a ride on mower or talk to the dog. But what it's done, and because it's quite a quality program and it's got a legacy, there's been some amazing products that it's introduced people to. So I think New Zealand has learnt about double glazing through Grand Designs, not through legislation. They learnt about triple glazing. They learnt you could get wooden triple glazed windows. They learnt about SIPS panels. They learnt about other alternative construction systems. So I think in the last 10 years, or say 10, 15 years ago, if I'd thrown SIPS panels or ICF, insulated concrete formwork, blockwork, and stuff in front of clients, they would be really concerned about this revolutionary new untested technology, even though you're telling them that it's been used overseas for years. Now they're coming to me and saying, I would like to use this product. And I'm just like, hallelujah, here we go. We don't even have to have that conversation now. The other thing that I find from a designer side of the equation, and been fortunate enough to sort of been playing in this sort of space around high performance homes, is I've developed a lot of relationships with suppliers who supply the products that we need. So the window joinery, my house has the same windows that is in Bob's 10-star house. And that was actually through Bob. I said, Bob, who are your windows from? And he says, NK Windows. This is great. I'll use them. So, and now you have those relationships. here in Tauranga, we now have a couple of SIPS panel factories. I was in one last week, so nothing beats taking a client into a factory and showing how a product's made, and all of a sudden they couldn't care less about how that things used to be done. They love what they see because they get it. So I think there's obviously online, there's obviously those opportunities to present it, but having people like myself and Bob and that who can then either show off and like the super home tours and stuff, those sort of things allow people to, get up close and personal with the products and the finished things. I think is really good. And then obviously if you can somehow replicate that online. So I imagine if you're doing the design guide online, when you're talking about better insulation and less thermal bridging, I would suggest that these, if you want to know more, here are some ways that this can be achieved. Because obviously our go-to is timber framed, right? And then there's better ways of doing timber frame. I'm sure Bob's told you about it. No nogs, no three stud corners, all those sort of things. But then there are other wall systems that are available as well. In Christchurch, you've got Formants who do SIPS panels, and I've flown clients from New Plymouth down to Tauranga down to Christchurch to go around the factory, and then that's got them over the line. So perhaps through the design guide, introducing some of those systems, and depending on how big you want it to get, YouTube clips on builds with this particular product and stuff like that. And obviously with the super home movement, you've got designers and builders who are comfortable with those products. If you go to your Joe Bloggs builder who's never done a high performance house and a designer who's never drawn up anything other than spec houses, then they're going to really struggle with delivering that. So I think getting those connections between the design community, the build community, and the punter out there who's interested, and probably education around you getting the right people on your team, I think is really, really important. And that dovetails quite nicely with the whole super home thing anyway. I guess the problem there is I now look at what I did in 2018. I'm like, I wouldn't do that now. So it's still better in the building code. It's we hardly use heating in the winter in the house. So I've got photos of our ventilation system management panel, and it was like 2 degrees overnight. We had no heating on in the last 5 or 6 days, and we were at like 19.5 degrees. So it does do the job well, but it's not how I do it now. So I'm pretty tough on myself as well. I would say give me 18 months, 2 years. These passive houses are going to be spectacular from a demonstration point of view. We do have one that will be, I think, an excellent example of a super home, which is under construction in Welcome Bay. It uses an alternative framing system, so it's timber framed, but the product's called Panelize. And so at the moment, the walls went up the other day, we've got the roofing going on. And so that's got a lot of things about it that fit the super home criteria. And that's probably an evolution of my own house, and it's 2 doors away. So, it's using Stark windows, which are the same UPVC type windows that NK do. It's high levels of insulation, fully insulated slab, ventilation system, or heat recovery ventilation system, those sort of things. And just a bit of innovation in a few different areas in that. So there is definitely work coming through. It's been quiet up here in the Bay. My roots are in Taranaki, so we've had a lot of work down that way. We've had one house that's just won an international award for us, and that would be probably a 7 or 8 star home. We've got one certified 7-star, and we weren't actually going for Homestar at all. And the client comes to me and says, I can get a cheaper loan if I can get Homestar 6. And I said, sweet. I said, you'll get that. And when we put it through the program without making any changes, this is just the existing house that we'd just finished. We got Homestar 7 without actually changing a thing. So yeah, aiming, we've always aimed better. So we do have one house that in New Plymouth that's got definite potential. It's a holiday home, but it's UPVC windows, heat recovery ventilation system, small footprint. It's only got about a 70 square metre footprint, 2 stories with a gin deck on the top. So yeah, it's quite a neat sort of different style of house. I don't know what else is happening in New Plymouth. I know there's a few passive houses being built by Hoffman's Builders and that. We've got, yeah, it's probably the last 18 months has been a lot of legwork getting ones underway. But I'd say in the next couple of years, we're going to have a lot of building stock that's going to be ideal for tours and stuff. Yeah, so I guess the one that we touched on right at the start is biophilic design, which it's got nothing to do with it's stuff that anybody can do at any time because it's not connected to the building code. But it's things that we could be doing. So understanding, so biophilic design is all about recognizing humanity's innate connection with nature. And what I mean by that is when you're stressed, when life gets tough, when things go wrong, what do? We go for a walk in the bush or we go for a walk along the beach. We get away from our four walls and a floor and a roof, and we get out of that space and we put ourselves in an environment where there are no parallel lines, no flat surfaces. And you ask yourself, why do we do that? Because somehow intrinsically our body tells us that that's what's good for us. So why do we create spaces that are counter to that environment? So I think in the residential thing, there's an opportunity to do things that support our well-being, like having lots of plants, using natural materials. One of the big ones that I've become quite passionate about is understanding acoustics. So you can have a beautiful, beautiful home, and the noise does not bring about calm or peace or serenity. So when we did this office was a bit of a guinea pig, like I was suggesting to Bob. And so by putting that black product there and the green product there, an acoustic product, and the whole idea is that the modern office, we've got 4 different businesses work out of this little suite here, and we're all on video calls. And we wanted to create an environment, one, where we didn't have to use fake backdrops, and 2, we could hold those conversations without being disruptive to the others. So one was a visual challenge, hence all the plants and screening. And the second one was those plants and screening and the acoustic materials allowed us to reduce the reverberation, reduce the volume and reduce the noise, and you have a calmer space. And so that's something in the residential that I think should be considered in every design. It's not part of a building code element, so it doesn't even get tested by anyone. So a lot of what we're talking about with super homes is here's the building code down here, and what we want to do is deliver a product that's great for people here, but that's because it's measuring against the building code. All right, building code touches on ventilation, which is a window, not good enough, so we're going to do better with a ducted HRV, right? But when you look at things like acoustics and the environment that you place yourself in, there's nothing in the building code, so therefore there's nothing for us to better. So it does get overlooked a little bit. So it's just something that I think is easy to implement in many ways, and in a renovation or a new build, even easier to plan a few, consider where you might want to improve the acoustics. If you've got a large living space, do we want all that noise when there's 5 or 6 people and a TV in that space? Can we make that a slightly calmer place to be in and still enjoy being associated with all those people and activity? That's a design consideration, and you probably won't get clients asking for it because people probably, one, we're not prompting that conversation. It's not a conversation you see presented to yourself, but when you talk about it, everybody goes, oh, I really would want that. I can see myself in that calm, quiet, peaceful, natural space. That sounds really, really lovely. I'd really like that. But until we have that conversation, nobody's thinking about it, and it's definitely a little bit, out of the periphery. Yeah, or on the periphery. So yeah, so that's probably just a left field thought is, where's that connection with nature in our building? When we built this office, me and my mate who he doesn't do any building, but he became my apprentice, and we did the whole fit out. So everything you see in here, we built ourselves. and so it's quite satisfying in that respect. And I built those green screens myself, and so they've got a timber trim which I use natural beeswax to finish it. And on day one, when everybody moved their gear in, Tom, who's no longer in this office, he went up and he just ran his hand over that curve and he goes, "Oh, timber, lovely." And I'm like, that is like, I was happy as like he didn't look at his desk and his screen or the aircon that we get given with the space. He touched that curve right there and just went, wood or timber, lovely, and I can smell it. And I'm like, perfect, absolutely perfect, you know. So those are things, you know, and that was quite cool because you got the visual, it's easy to see, but you even touched it, so the tactile approach to it too. So I think there's, from a design point of view, there are opportunities where we can give clients so much more for very little effort, dealing with that tactile, dealing with that visual, dealing with that calm, dealing with the noise. Life's not slowing down at all. We're only ever getting busier by the looks of it. So, what can we do through the built environment that actually brings calm